Hello and welcome to UAT Time within the United Countries special by First Ukraine. You can find us on the frequencies available on our website, first28.com. I'm Sergey, Velichanskiy.
And I am Olivier Vedrine. UAT Time is dedicated to bring Ukraine and Europe closer to each other by introducing the real Ukraine to the rest of the world.
Ukraine has such a wonderful heritage that identifies Ukrainians from any other nation in the world. Can art and culture be the means of communication of our goals and values?
Our guest today is Myroslava Hartmond, Director of Triptych Global Arts Workshop and Research Associate of University of Oxford.
Welcome.
Hello,
Welcome.
thank you.
Thank you very much for stopping by, and I guess we are talking about cultural diplomacy. What do you think? How do you define what is it that you do with what you do?
To me, cultural diplomacy is about communication. It's about communicating what a nation stands for, what its values are, its beliefs, its goals, and its symbols. So cultural diplomacy is about carrying that message across through cultural initiatives such as art exhibitions, such as concerts, such as exchanges.
Yes, and what about the power of, because we talk about soft power when we think about cultural diplomacy. For example, USA use Hollywood to do some soft power in this cultural diplomacy. France used for a long time now, from a long time, the French culture for diplomacy. How you will integrate in this strategy the culture of Ukraine? How you will integrate that?
Well, soft power is a term that was coined by an American academic, Joseph Nye, and it's all about attraction rather than coercion. So in order to define Ukraine's strategy, we must first answer the question, what is the most attractive aspect of Ukrainian culture? We are in the favorable position that there are many. There is our rich artistic heritage, musical heritage. I think we talked about Myroslava. He was in fact a Ukrainian composer. Repin was born in Ukraine, Ivazovsky as well. So many famous names that are known as Russian masters, but in fact have a shared heritage with Ukraine. Also the Ukrainian cuisine, something that is very attractive and is well known the world over amongst diaspora, but not only. And its thriving contemporary art scene, contemporary music. So in order to build a strategy for Ukraine, we identify what is the most attractive to people outside of Ukraine, and we help to promote those arts.
And you are right, because nobody knows that Myroslava was Ukrainian or Gogol.
Well, I would say for many in the world, even borscht is identified as Russian.
Or Jewish.
Okay, yes.
The Oxford English Dictionary until 2006, I think, defined borscht as a traditional Jewish beetroot-based soup.
Is that
no
true?
mention of Ukraine, but of course there is an immense Jewish community that used to live in Ukraine who would have adopted the borscht dish.
But to make borscht delicious, you add pork into it. How do you make
I know, I'm not sure.
Jewish, but that's all right. Now, as examples of soft power, would we be correct if we say, okay, the United States, they use Hollywood, they use like Coca-Cola, and all the, even some examples of global culture. That's their, like rock and roll.
Absolutely.
Stuff like that. That's their soft power. And Ukraine, with Triptych Global Art Workshop, you pretty much concentrate on a specific direction, right?
Absolutely.
You don't cover all.
Well, we focus on the visual arts. Why? Because Triptych Gallery is Ukraine's first private art gallery. It's based in Andrievsky Spusk, and it's been there since 1988.
That's the sacred place.
It's the sacred place. It's very much the Vina Cava of Ukrainian culture, the Montmartre of the East.
Yes, totally agree.
I decided to rebrand the gallery over a year ago now, and to expand its outreach from just Ukraine to well, globally. That's why it's now Triptych Global Arts Workshop. Now, what Triptych does is, apart from hosting art exhibitions and showcasing my family's collection of Ukrainian art, we do research, we do workshop events, lecture events, we invite experts from around the world to exchange their experiences with professionals as well as the general public here in Ukraine. So I think cultural diplomacy, a very important element is communicating back to Ukrainians that their culture is being perceived, received, and liked outside of Ukraine.
But in this, yesterday when we met, we talked about different aspects about the soft power of USA and the soft power of the European Union. And I think in the way of thinking of the European Union, your strategy is very good, because the European Union, we have also a soft power, but this soft power is, we talk about mass consumption and mass communication. And for the European Union, we are united in diversity. And this is, I think, for the Ukrainian diplomacy, cultural diplomacy, you have your instrument, you have your place to take in this European family, because Europe is not a mass consumption, it's not a mass communication, it's diversity communication. And I think you have to insist on that, because Ukraine also has a lot of diversity in Ukrainian borders.
Well, we have so many different subcultures.
Yes, Carpathian culture, Eastern cultures, Odessa. I was in those places, and the cultures is very different from the Carpat, from Kharkov, and this is amazing.
Even take the national costumes. I mean, from region to region, they're so different. There are some similarities, but really they're different. But let's come back to visual arts. What helps you to identify Ukrainian artists, the modern artists, contemporary? How do you find them? Do you participate in festivals, or do you organize those? How do you find those people?
I mentioned that my family has a considerable collection of Ukrainian fine art, and we've been passionate about Ukrainian art for many years now, and have amassed what we like to think the best examples of Ukrainian 20th century art as well as contemporary art. So the project that I'm focusing my efforts on at the moment is Ivan Marchuk Supernova. Now, it's Mr. Marchuk's 80th birthday this year, so there is currently an immense retrospective exhibition of his work at the Art Arsenal, as well as an exhibition of works from my private collection of Marchuk, works from his so-called American period. The reason why Marchuk is such an appealing artist for cultural diplomatic projects, there are three reasons. First of all, he really is a fantastic artist. Quality is key here. He was named amongst the 100 living geniuses in the UK, and he was the only Ukrainian to make it on that list. The second thing is, of course, his interesting biography. He was persecuted by the Soviet authorities. He was not a member of the Union of Artists. He really had a tough time, I think, and he emigrated. And he lived in Australia, he lived in the US, in Canada. So really his outreach has been global for many, many decades now. He's had over 100 exhibitions. So he's already a global brand, if you will. And I think the third very important aspect is that he is intrinsically a Ukrainian artist. His work carries a unique cultural code that has been called the genotype of liberty or genotype of freedom. So really, to represent Ukraine, we have to take someone who is representative of Ukraine.
Exactly.
I saw yesterday some pictures and paintings of this artist, and that was very interesting. And yes, some of them are very colorful. Very. You see that, and that's like communication with the artist with this painting, and very, very interesting. But you have also other project with some embassy to show also the Ukrainian culture. Can you talk about that also? It's not your first project.
I have been fortunate to have participated in several projects over the last few years. I would like to also highlight my academic research that I'm doing for the University of Oxford for the Centre of International Studies. I'm trying to identify Ukraine's soft power potential, if you will. And I have a number of academic conferences coming up in 2016 at the University of Cambridge, Oxford. I have one in Washington, D.C. about, funnily enough, Euro 2012. And
Seriously?
Ukraine's regional experience in organizing sporting mega events. So I think another very important channel for
That's
cultural
interesting.
diplomacy is academic exchange. If we can represent Ukraine on through an academic platform and really communicate positive experiences as well as maybe not negative experiences, but what we can learn from our experience, that's also very, very important. So my research, I like to think, is an important input into promoting Ukraine abroad.
I mean, yes, there are many different levels where we can promote, and it's exciting to hear that, seriously. You know, basically the research that you just mentioned, but then there is another project that you told us about.
That would relate to the centenary from the birth of Vasil Hnatowicz Nepuipivo, or don't drink beer, one word. That's an old Cossack surname. It's very, very unique. He came from a long line of Cossacks who professed to have supernatural qualities. They could levitate and they could transform water and do all sorts of things. Now, very interesting character. He lived a long and fruitful life. He was born in effectively Tsarist Ukraine and died in Yushchenko's Ukraine. So he's really seen it all during his lifetime and created a wealth of works. And his landscapes were academic, but also impressionistic. And he was part of the Soviet establishment, but at the same time, he was very much his own person. And I think the reason, where we can see this highlighted is, for example, the very first embassy of independent Ukraine in the US that was opened in New York in 1991, hosted an exhibition of Vasil Nepuipivo's works.
Oh,
and I have
great.
spoken with members of the Ukrainian diaspora in the US and Canada, and they all have his works in their collection. So another very important, different, not a non-conformist contemporary artist, but very much a fine artist. But I think diversity is a very key aspect of Ukraine, and we should emphasize that in the project.
Another question, you know, well, I spent a few years in Montmartre. That was my place when I was in Paris.
The wild days.
Yeah, that was very nice. And I spent five years in Montmartre. And I have also some artists in my family, and really I like that. And what I think maybe a project you can also do is how we can put art in education. I talked about this. One of my professors said to me, if you want to understand a country, you have to sit in front of a painting, you have to listen to the music of the country, and you have to read a book of the country. And with that, you understand the time, the space, and you will be in the spirits of the country. And for me, this is art education. This is not only politics, economy, mathematics, and physics. And I think we have, if we want to do really a soft power, and if we want to do like all the Ukrainian will be ambassador of Ukraine, you have also to engage in education, some arts courses. What do you think about that, and what can you do about that? Because for me, this is obvious that nobody, not nobody, but a large part of the people don't know their own artist, and sometimes they don't know their own history.
Well, in soft power speak, what you're talking about now is phase 2 cultural diplomacy. So cultural diplomacy, which is done by non-state actors. And effectively, every single Ukrainian, whether a Ukrainian citizen or a citizen of any other country, can be an ambassador of Ukrainian culture. And in order to achieve that effective communication, they have to know about their country's culture, and they have to be proud enough to communicate that in an engaging way, which is why education, well, the cultural element of education is extremely important. And there is a lot of very good work being done by Ukrainian authorities as well as non-government actors in educating the Ukrainian population on the achievements of Ukrainians. Now, we talked about the regional aspect, but there's also the historical aspect. Ukraine is a country with a very long history that dates back to the prehistoric times. We've had a Hellenic influence, we've had a Byzantine influence, we've had a Lithuanian influence, as well as, you know, a number of other countries. Russia will be a country that influenced us in our history, that have had a profound influence. So it's really embracing that historical richness and diversity, as well as the regional diversity that could really make us proud to be Ukrainian today.
I guess we have to touch this issue because when crisis hits, one of the first probably side of life that struggles is art and culture. Usually, you know, when the budgets are cut, that's where, you know, and unfortunately education as well suffers. How do you manage to expand, to grow, or because in this time of crisis, because some people find it hard to survive?
Absolutely. Triptych Gallery has been a commercial enterprise from its very start, from 1988, and I have to say that the previous year has been very difficult on the business, which is why I really decided to expand into other things apart from. So Triptych is not a shop. It's not just a shop.
Okay.
And at the moment, we don't have any external financing. And I'm in correspondence with several funding organizations, as well as private companies. Art patronage is an institution that we do have in Ukraine, but there are only really isolated examples of wealthy people who have businesses who help the arts. I think that's also a very important aspect of making people proud of Ukrainian culture, encouraging them to give to Ukrainian culture. But at the moment, I have to say that it's been funded very much out of my own savings. I do hope that things will pick up, and I hope that the international exhibition tour of Ivan Marchuk's work will not only find sponsors and potential partners, but will also generate additional income that I can invest back into the project.
Because what I know as far as other parts of you know, culture and cultural diplomacy, like for instance the singers, they struggle quite a bit because a lot of events cancel, and people, even if they want to invite a singer to perform, sometimes they can't afford them to come. So there's a lot of things happening. What would you advise to the new generation of people who want to see Ukraine wealthy, being well known in the world, you know, from the good stand, not for the problems of corruption and all that, but with this, you know, when they represent not only the Ukrainian culture, which is known by hopak dance and the culture that goes way back to hundreds of years.
Culture.
Yeah. But even the modern type of culture, you know, the rock music or pop music, or what would you advise? Are there any lessons that you've learned that you may want to communicate to them?
Well, I think the absolute bottom line is education in all its many different aspects. Languages.
Yes.
The most important thing for Ukrainian youth today is to learn English and at least one other language that is not Russian or Ukrainian. I think the linguistic aspect is a huge advantage for Ukraine, because not only are we intrinsically bilingual, but also very many young people, as well as older professionals, speak good English. French, German are also very strong, Polish, as well as a number of other languages, as we know. So the linguistic aspect, we cannot communicate with the outside world if we cannot understand what the outside world is telling us, and if we can't speak to the outside world in a number of other languages. I mean, English is a good start, but I would argue for French, Spanish, and other languages.
But I want to underline a fact. I saw some galleries in Kiev. I saw some museum, and I think if we want to talk about money, with the price of art in Ukraine, you have a big instrument to show Ukraine art. Why? Because this is cheaper. The art in Ukraine is very cheaper. If you see the price in France, or in England, or in USA, you can have Ukrainian artists for not nothing, but not a lot of money. And I think you have maybe to communicate about this low price of Ukrainian artists to talk about only investment. You want to invest in some new art, new country, invest in Ukraine, because art is cheaper than in France.
See,
and I think it's a good way of thinking also.
But honestly,
Very pragmatic.
I don't like this word cheaper, seriously, because when you use the word cheap, it can go both ways. Cheap in price, but cheap in quality.
No,
and for the most
not cheap in quality,
Westerners that speak English, when the word cheap is used, that could be a wrong communication to me, honestly.
Having had quite a bit of experience of the Ukrainian art market in the past year, I can tell you that the good stuff is not cheap.
Okay,
and the good stuff has a global art market value attached to it.
I thought of that.
So, but I think what Olivier is saying, that there are many artists whose work is more affordable than perhaps artists of the same age and status in the West. And this is where a lot of corporate outreach work comes in. So many corporations, many banks that have their offices in Ukraine, they have a corporate art collection and they decide to decorate their offices with Ukrainian art. Quite often you have to come to them and say, guys, there's a lot of talent, a lot of potential. You have some bare walls. Let's talk about this, right?
Yes.
And many of them are very happy. For example, ING Bank has an enormous art collection, a corporate art collection, and they collect from all the countries where they have offices. And they've been I think they've been instrumental in promoting Ukrainian art in Holland, for example. And Holland, a bit of a prickly pear at the moment as far as Ukrainian-Dutch relations are concerned. We've just had the referendum, which showed that maybe the Dutch don't feel that Ukraine is quite ready to join Europe. But culture can be a very important means of breaking the ice and showing that actually, you know, there is a lot of potential and a lot of warmth among the Ukrainian people and talent. Another example of that, if I can just say, there is an investment forum taking place later this week on the 28th of January. It's a global investment agency forum, and I'll be curating the art program there. Decision makers. Our target audience is, well, decision makers, people who make decisions about whether to invest in Ukraine, about whether to do business with Ukraine, about whether to enter political relations and alliances with Ukraine. And culture can certainly form a very attractive backdrop and facilitate that communication.
Yes, because in the world, in this 21st century, in the world of internet, in the world of Twitter, one image, one picture can be a good summary to understand a country.
Yes.
And that's why for me, the cultural diplomacy is a complement, we have to have the cultural diplomacy in this global strategy.
And that is why, since time is running again, that is why it's such a pleasure to have you, Myroslava, as a guest, because you do tremendous work. Actually, it may not be that noticeable with all of the crisis and political and activists movements, and whoever speaks louder is noticeable more than those that really use the soft power of the country, of the culture, and represent the country all over the world. So thank you very
Thank you,
much.
yeah.
Thank you.
It was United Country UAT time by First Ukraine. Our guest was Myroslava Hartmond, director of Triptych Global Arts Workshop.
Olivier Vedrine and Sergey Velichanskiy were working for you in the studio. Stay with us and we will show to you the real Ukraine.
Thank you for being with us. Have a good day and see you soon.